From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Good morning and welcome to Face the State. I'm Dave Parker, MTN Political Analyst, joined today by MTN Chief Political Reporter, Mike Dennison. Elected to Montana's 1st Congressional District at 33 years of age, and then to the U.S. Senate when he was 37, Max Baucus has spent more than 4 decades in public service to his state and nation. He just completed 2.5 years in China, and now he's back in his beloved Treasure State. Today, he is here with us in the studio to talk about his career, the Trump administration, and the future of Montana. Ambassador Baucus, welcome, and thanks for coming on the program.
You bet, Dave. Yeah. Good to be here. Thank you very much, really.
Yeah. Good to see you. And Mike, it's good to see you back down here in Bozeman.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So let's open up the discussion. And right now, we're talking about health care in Washington, D.C. We have unified government, and the Republicans want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And of course, you, Ambassador Baucus, had a big hand in that bill. What do you think?
Well, frankly, I think the Affordable Care Act, which we worked very hard on, worked pretty well. It's got flaws, it's got problems, but it certainly provided a lot more health insurance for people that earlier did not have it. And it started in some way to get some control over the increase of health care costs in our country. So it's not too bad. And I think these efforts now in the Congress to repeal and replace are really a fool's errand, because a lot of people are going to get hurt, they're going to lose insurance, they're not going to get the health care they need, and they're going to own it, the majority party, and after a while they're going to say, oh gosh, maybe we made a mistake here. This isn't turning out quite the way we hoped it would be. And I hope that cooler heads prevail there. I'm not sure that they will. It seems so far that the majority party, Republicans, are trying to just jam it down the throats of the Congress, the American people, and that would be very unfortunate.
Now, of all the changes that you've seen that they're proposing in the Affordable Care Act, which ones do you find perhaps the most troublesome?
Well, I think it's unwise to roll back Medicaid. There are a lot of low-income people and low-income kids who currently get health insurance because of Medicaid. The low-income program was expanded, and the Republicans now want to roll back, turn it over to the states. In many states, strapped for cash, after a while are going to start to cut back Medicaid, and the net effect is there are going to be fewer people, fewer low-income people, fewer low-income kids getting health care. Second, a lot of people don't get health insurance through their employer. They get it through what's called the individual market. And the effect of this bill is going to be to make it harder for people to buy health insurance. Why? Because the so-called tax credits that are going to be provided here, compared with the current incentives that are allowed, given to people on the individual market, are going to be much lower. That is, the new bill is going to be lower, harder, so fewer people in the individual market are going to be able to get health insurance.
But you've heard the criticisms of that specific portion about that individual market, that we had all those essential benefits that actually have driven up the price of some of the cost of those policies, and people couldn't keep the policies that they wanted. What do you think about those criticisms? And getting rid of that part of it is going to be a plus in the minds of the people who are doing this.
Yeah.
You would agree or disagree, or what?
Look, anything can be improved upon. The Affordable Care Act is so big; it was about 2,000 pages. Could be improved upon. There are areas where there can be more flexibility. It gets technical, but things like formularies, you don't have to be quite as rigid as they otherwise are. The benefits provisions, the required benefits may not have to be as rigid as they are. In addition, this goes the other way, but the Republicans the last few years have made the ACA more difficult. Why? By cutting back on funding for certain things like high-risk pools and risk corridors and things. It gets technical.
Yeah.
But the effect is to undermine the effectiveness of the bill.
Right, and didn't some of those cuts also undermine the creation of some of those the co-ops around the country?
That's correct. Co-ops is an alternative, and because of other provisions, basically they're revenue provisions, which the majority party has cut back on, make it very difficult for co-ops to operate.
Yeah.
Certainly what the Republicans were able to do during the campaign season, and frankly, since ACA was passed, is to attack particularly the individual mandate and the fact that it seems as un-American that you're forced to buy insurance. If you had to go back to that bill, to the initial portion of it, what do you think you would have done differently? Or maybe you wouldn't have done anything differently?
Well, for insurance to work, everybody has to have insurance. That is, for a healthcare system to work, the more people are part of this system, the more on a net basis it tends to lower costs, certainly for those who have the greatest healthcare needs. We have to decide as a country, do we want everyone in America to be part of this system, or just the more wealthy, those who can figure out how to make ends meet better, to be part of the system? My judgment is we want all Americans to be part of this system. That's good for America. It's morally the right thing to do, and it's going to make health costs on a net basis be lower than they otherwise would be for all Americans. Now, the individual mandate goes to that direction. I would change it. I would make it less of a penalty and more of a carrot rather than the stick. I'd say, okay, here are some of the rewards you're going to get if you, a healthy, young, invincible, sign up for health care. Because the penalty makes it sound like maybe I'm a bad person or something. Rather, make it positive.
So, of course, that's the issue, is that we need more young people to
Correct.
get insurance in order to spread the risk.
Correct.
Well, Medicare is an enormously popular program among seniors. Why not just take Medicare and open it to everybody?
Well, many have suggested that. Don't forget, when it was enacted, I think it was 67.
Yeah.
It was very unpopular. And gradually over time, as with Social Security, we improved upon it and made it work. Medicare would be a good alternative. Many in America will not want to go in that direction because essentially that's a single payer system. And in the United States, we're not politically quite there. We're kind of inching a little bit in that direction, but to be honest, those who are pushing an alternative, replace and repeal, want to go the other direction. And that's a basic decision that America has to make. We are not France, we're not Sweden, we're America. It's more kind of go west, young man. We're more of a free market country compared to others. So we have to come up with a uniquely American solution. And that's what we try to do with the Affordable Care Act. Combine both a little bit. But it's difficult because of who we are as a country. But nevertheless, a solution that moves the ball from where we were.
We may come back to that, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is the political climate in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
right now. I'm wondering, if you were a leader of the Democratic minority in Washington, D.C., what would be your counsel to them on how to deal with the reality of Republican President Trump and Republican majorities in Congress? Well, I mean, fight, work together, what? What would be your counsel?
Yeah, well, this is always a big question.
Yeah.
Whether the majority or the minority is, do you do what you think is right? Do you try to be political? Because all those kinds of things. My judgment is the best thing to do is do what you think is right. Represent your state. Be reasonable. Listen to the other side. Try to work out agreements where you can. When you can't, you just have to stand up and say no. I do not think it makes a lot of sense to throw a wrench in the gears because that comes across as too partisan. It makes the other side even less likely to work with you. But do what's right. Stand up. Make good proposals and recognize, hey, they won. Voters around the country spoke, but let's work with it in a way that we think is better.
Although, I recall in 2005, though, when George Bush had just been reelected and decided
Right.
to try to privatize Social Security,
Yeah.
I mean, you were a key part of the strategy that said, we're just going to say no, we're going to stop this.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's anything you look at now where Democrats should go to the mat to try to say no.
Well, that's a judgment call. In my judgment, it was right to say no to privatizing Social Security. That would have been a disaster for seniors. One kind of interesting statistic, if we had no Social Security program today, 50% of American seniors would be below the poverty line. Social Security has done a lot for a lot of seniors. There are times we just got to say no, but they're basically matters of conscience where you should say no. If it's not a matter of conscience, if it's a matter just because you want to cause problems or just be partisan, then I start to back off.
Is there a place that you could see an opportunity for Democrats to work with the Trump administration?
Well, let's take the Affordable Care Act repeal and replace. There are some Republicans, some moderate Republicans, who do want to work out a deal. There are some other Republicans who are just way off right field, and there's no way of getting them. So Democrats can and should try to find a way to work with some of those moderates, especially in the Senate, where it's easier to work out agreements.
The thing you were well known for in the Senate, and you look at the data on this, it's pretty clear that you were a moderate, centrist Democrat and that you were there as a person preserving the Senate institution. Who are the people left today that are the Senate protectors, the Senate institutionalists who care about the chamber maybe more than they care about partisan politics? Is anyone like that left? Like, you seem to be all gone.
No, they're there. They're few. We've got a couple from Montana who do a pretty good job. It's a lot of this is a function of the times. That is, with huge advances in the media, it's internet, social networking, Twitter, all that tends to pull us apart in the Senate rather than urging us to work together. Because a person can disseminate infinite information on any subject, anytime. Whether it's true or false is irrelevant, and so it's hard to know what's true and what's false. But when the going gets tough, as Vince Lombardi said, the tough get going, which means people have to stand up and just really take it. That is, take this situation here and try to do a better job of doing what's right. It's difficult. It's easy for me to say that here. I'm not there, but that's what I think needs to be done.
And we talked a little bit about the Republican domination in Washington, D.C. right now, but also in the past half dozen years, Republicans have won a lot of governorships. They've won control of a lot of legislatures. Things have kind of really been in their favor quite a bit for the past half dozen years.
Right.
I'm wondering, how do Democrats turn that around?
Well, it sounds corny.
Yeah, that's a big
question. Yeah. Some of the so-called Republican takeover is because it's so much money. If you look at the races around the country, legislative races, gubernatorial races, you'll see that they're very, very heavily financed by lots of right-wing organizations, basically starting with the Koch brothers. Mm-hmm. A lot of money is piled into all these races, and Democrats haven't done that. They have not done it on an organized basis, and have to if they're going to do better. It shouldn't be based on money, though. It should be based on policy and what's right. I believe that the more, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you go out and talk to your people constantly and do what you think is right, listen, and you got to really listen to what they are thinking and saying, that'll make a big difference. And I dare say Montanans aren't that different from people in many other states either. What do most people want? They want a decent living, they want food on the table, take care of their kids, decent health care, safe drinking water, et cetera. It's pretty simple, it's pretty basic. And so my answer to your question is, just keep doing what's right rather than trying to be too partisan.
Now, but if I live in rural Montana or anywhere in rural America, what do Democrats have to offer me? I mean, abortion rights, LGBT rights, environmentalism, that's not going to pay the bills.
Well, I'd start with just, go in there. Go into Forsyth, go into Chester, go into all the smaller towns in, say, in Montana, listening, and then focusing more on jobs, focusing more on the economy. Here's what we can do to help get better wheat prices, get better cattle prices. Here we can do to get better roads here in your community. Just focus on the basics. And I would talk a lot about the right to life stuff. I mean, people have their views on that irrespective of economics, and you're not going to change anybody's view on that, but you can show that you're trying to work with people on what else people care about.
Something that John Tester has talked about before is him looking at Big Sandy and looking at the Choteau County.
Yeah. And
he's seen, of course, the town get smaller and
right.
people leave and the community gets smaller. And a lot of those people look around and they say, this is not fair, I don't like this.
Right.
And a lot of them then say, it's somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
And then they point to, for example, China. They say, hey, it's all China, they're taking our jobs away. But that's not really the issue here. The issue is more automation it was the reason why a lot of jobs and blue-collar jobs have gone away, and not so much China. What's your take on that?
Well, first, it's very sad. A lot of smaller towns are struggling. They're sometimes folding up. It is really sad. I hate it, but I think it's basic economics. It's people want to go to the city to get better jobs, not getting good prices for their farm products. It's just having a hard time making ends meet. A lot of it is automation. But in the past, some of it has been China. There's no question that low wages in China and other countries has made it easier for American companies to move offshore, move to countries like China and build big plants. That's less of an issue here in Montana because we have fewer big plants that have moved overseas, but it is a problem in the United States, and we got to deal with it. China is protectionist. They protect their own companies at the expense of ours, and we just got to stand up more. But that doesn't go to the main problem that you raised, namely the problem that small towns have.
But you've also advocated for a lot of free trade deals during
Right.
your time.
Right.
You were for NAFTA, right? And
right.
you were for a lot of free.
Right.
I mean, was that a mistake, or I mean, what should be done to address this issue?
Those are all very important in my judgment, those trade agreements, because Montana, the country, will do better the more we open up and trade with other countries. However, I think a big mistake was made when we negotiated the last big trade agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, by not spending more time and attention listening to and attending to those legitimate problems that people have. There is something in the law called TAA, Trade Adjustment Assistance. It doesn't do very much. It helps a little, not very much. We needed something much more basic to show to the guy, the steel worker who's lost his job, the mill worker who's lost his job, hey, we hear you, and here's some things that we're doing to make sure that you know that we're all in America together here. We didn't do enough of that in TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. And by the way, Trans-Pacific Partnership, by not passing it, I think, is the biggest geopolitical mistake we have made in the last decade by not getting that through. Why? Because it's not passed. It signals to Southeast Asia, it signals to China. The United States is on the verge of maybe not paying as much attention, if not leaving a little bit. It's a big void which China will fill to their advantage, to our detriment.
You talked a little bit about trade, which was a huge issue, of course, in the presidential race. When you look at the future of international trade, what are some of the basic things you think it should include that it doesn't include now, to benefit America?
Well, one thing is beef. I mean, well, one country, China. I've been trying to get China to take beef for years. So far, they don't take any American beef. They take Australian beef. They take Brazilian, Argentine beef. They don't take American beef. American ingenuity and creativity is very, very good. I would focus more on, if I were president, help American companies be strong that way. Then I'd go overseas and say, China, you can't do this anymore. You got to stop, subsidizing all these companies that compete with us. You got to open up more so our companies can do business in your country. We got to be more firm about it and even stand up with some potential reciprocal action if they don't. The Chinese respect two things: status and strength. They love status. They love all the pomp and circumstance. They like all of that. They also very much respect strength. I think they respect strength as much as anybody in the world, and they can smell weakness miles away. And so if we are perceived as strong and are strong, both economically, internally, but also externally and standing up to them, that will go a long way to make sure that our interests are protected.
You served in the Senate when Ronald Reagan was president, so you were at the front line when taxes were cut, military expenses were increased, and there were cuts to domestic programs. President Trump just came out and said, look, I want to increase defense, I want to cut taxes, and I want to have a big infrastructure program of $1 trillion. So let me ask you this. How can we be tough with China when the biggest holder of American debt is China, and theoretically will continue to be China if we continue to add to the deficit and debt? I mean, China understands strength, they understand weakness. We look pretty weak.
Well, that's a big question. First of all, they don't hold that much debt. They hold maybe as 10, 12%. Second, in dollars. Second, they don't want to upset the apple cart too much by selling off that debt. Some people think that gives them leverage. It doesn't give them very much leverage. They don't see it that way. But you're right. How do you do the infrastructure bill? Do all the things you talk about? Well, you can't. You just can't do it. You got to pay for what you're going to build in our country more. This gets a little theoretical, but I was very much interested in a book by Paul Kennedy years and years ago. And his basic thesis is countries are not, in the sweep of history, Greeks, Romans.
I've read this book.
Okay. Yeah. Countries are not, in the sweep of history, defeated by external armies. Rather, they're defeated by internal decay. And I think strong economics at home projects great strength, and we should focus more on that.
So are we at a precipice moment, given Paul Kennedy's thesis? I mean, he does project the decline of America at the end of that book, which I read a long time ago.
I don't know. The thing we have to do is all we possibly can to keep America strong. we have two choices: try or do nothing. All we can do our very best.
I want to bring us back to politics in Montana a little bit.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a special congressional election coming up in just a few weeks.
Right.
What would be your advice to Rob Quist, the Democratic candidate, at this point?
Yeah. Well, go all around the state, talk to the many people, and play that guitar as many places as he can. Get known, because a big problem, especially with an election coming up so soon, I think it's May 25th, is name recognition. People just don't know Mr. Quist. They got to get to know him, what his name is, and one way is to get around and just meet and talk to people.
Yeah.
And just be solid. Do what he thinks is right. Look, people are pretty smart. They can figure out when you're a phony or when you're not a phony. If you're telling it straight, they pick up on it, and that's what any good person, including the candidate, should do.
And now, are you involved at all in politics anymore, or have you kind of left that behind you?
No. I spent 47 years in public service, loved it.
Yeah.
But now, let others serve our people.
Yeah.
What was the key to your political longevity? I mean, you're not the only one. I mean, Chuck Grassley's still there, and of course Ted Stevens there for a long time. And if you look at all of you that served in the Senate for a long period of time, what was the thing that made you be able to stay in office for that long time?
You're going to have to ask Montana voters that question, why they voted for me sometimes rather than somebody else. But look at Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley is home all the time. He goes to all the 99 counties in Iowa every year. He bleeds for the people of Iowa. And I tried my very best to get around the state as much as possible. I didn't get to all 56 counties every year. I did over a longer period of time, but you'd be with people, talk to people. You got to remember too, your state comes first. Don't get too involved when you're back there with lots of other issues that are kind of fancy and seductive and all that kind of, because remember where you came from. It's your people who elected you. I had a little sign on my desk that said Montana comes first. And I always say, and I believed it, I meant it. Back then, I had 900,000 of the world's best bosses. And I'm just the hired hand. I'm just the employee. The voters of our state are our employers. Now, they don't all agree all the time among themselves, but I'm still, you got to remember, that's why you're there.
Now we talked about internal decay, and I'm not going to ask you whether you think that's happening or not, but I would like to know, when you look at both Montana and the country, what would you point at as maybe one or two of the biggest challenges that face the country and the state, and how we approach those challenges?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, I'm a little concerned about a certain casualness in America. People aren't as hungry to succeed, advance, and take care of their family and their kids and themselves as much as I'd like to see. I compare it with, say, the Chinese. Chinese are hungry. I mean, they are so competitive, it's so pragmatic, so practical. I mean, they are and almost survivalists. It's just there's a saying over there that in China that the Chinese will occupy any unoccupied space. That's the way they drive. That's the way they queue up. I mean, if there's a little space there, they'll take it because they're so competitive. We Americans could be more aggressive and competitive in a certain sense of just trying harder, working harder, because at democracy too. Democracy is not free. You got to work at it. By that I mean you got to really work to find out what the facts are. Who's telling the truth here? It doesn't just fall in your lap. You got to work to find out, and they got to do something about it. And I think not enough Americans are as involved as they could and should. In Montana, I think we're great. We're lucky. We should play on our strengths. Our strengths are our people, agriculture. It's our environment here, all the public lands, the public space. Montana has a real allure to it, even in China. I tell people, oh, Montana. Oh, we love Montana. Now, a lot of them just go to Yellowstone and stop to encourage them to come a little further north. But we've got a lot of people like Montana.
When you were in the Senate, did you hold a lot of town hall meetings throughout the state? And I do recall in particular there was one pretty controversial one you had here in Bozeman right after ACA.
Yeah.
Was that kind of your thing? Did you go around and talk to a lot of the
Well,
citizens?
it's interesting. Yeah, there's that, and also what I used to call them work days. I was cleaning out storage unit here in Bozeman a few days ago with all my stuff, and my God, all the photographs I've forgotten. I work at this job and that job and that job and that job. Show up 8 o'clock in the morning, once a month. Work all day long, not to watch, but to work. Worked out here, road jobs outside of Bozeman a couple, 3 times, wait tables, everything. So getting out on those work days, I call it, made a big difference. Town halls too are extremely important, and I learned after a while a real key to a fairly successful town hall meeting is to show respect. You got to really show the respect to people there, and you show that by listening to them. I remember one very contentious one. The guy gave me a real hard time. He called me on Senator Baucus, on and on and on and on. And when he finished, I said to him, a big guy, I said to him, "Sir, I hear you. And that's a very deeply held view. It's heartfelt, and you believe that very, very sincerely. I know that. I have another view, and I urge you to consider my view, because it's also deeply and sincerely held." In that room, you could just feel the tension in the room fall a little bit. And at the end of the meeting, believe it or not, I couldn't believe it, I got a standing ovation. Now, it wasn't the most exuberant in the world. People did stand up. And why? After a while, I realized because it was respect. I showed that guy respect. And he really appreciated that I respected him. So I've learned, as contentious as town hall meetings can be, you just start out and say, hey, let's not just go off the handle here for 5 minutes. Let me just speak for a few minutes. Don't let her rip, but just show respect.
We're coming toward the end of our show. We got about 2 minutes left, but there's been something that I've been itching to ask you. I mean, you've served with every president, from Gerald Ford, all the way through Barack Obama. What have you learned from that experience in terms of what makes a presidential administration succeed? And we got, like I said, a little under 2 minutes. So.
Yeah. Well, Ronald Reagan was a good president. He is perceived to be a leader. Now, it was a Cold War, and so it was a little easier, us against the Soviet Union, et cetera. But he projected that. He had a vision. He stuck with it, and he had a sense about himself that people liked. Generally, I think a president has to lead. I mean, after all, that's why we elect presidents. Presidents tend to be father figures as opposed to mother figures. That is, to protect America. And mother figures are more legislators, provide. So a president, I think, has to lead. He or she has to also work with the Congress, spend a lot of time with members of Congress, go around the country a lot. What I'd like to see a president now do, because we're kind of fractured, we're dysfunctional, is kind of change gears a little bit, and for a couple of years, just go all around the country without a lot of media, without a lot of entourage, and just meet with people, talk to people, listen, go to the ghettos, go to Indian reservations, go to Silicon Valley, go to the inner cities, just talk to people and listen to people with a message of unifying America, bringing America together, focusing on education really, on making sure we do create jobs and show that we're all one country. That would go a long way.
So Senator Baucus, it's been great having you on the show, and you're retired here in Bozeman now. Any plans to write your memoirs?
Oh, I don't know. Right now I'm unpacking boxes, we'll see.
Unpacking a lot of boxes. Well, a lot to talk about here today on Face the State. We covered a lot of terrain, a lot of ground. Please join us next time on Face the State when we'll be from Helena talking about probably the budget and the hottest issues in the legislature. Until then, Dave Parker, thanks for joining us on Face the State.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.